I knew something was off the moment I pulled into my driveway and saw the empty rectangle of dirt where my shed used to be. My name's Daryl Lambert, and 3 days earlier, I'd left town to help my brother install a new HVAC system in his place 2 hours north. I came back to find my backyard gutted like a crime scene. The shed wasn't just some prefab shack. I built that thing with my own hands, pressure-treated wood, custom shelving, reinforced roof. It housed my woodworking tools, my motorcycle, and a few personal keepsakes from my dad. Now it was just gone. Not even debris left behind. Just tire tracks in the grass and a faint smell of diesel. I stormed into the house, threw my bags down, and checked the security footage from the backyard camera I'd installed last year after a raccoon tried to break into the trash bins. Sure enough, the recording showed a rented flatbed truck pulling up behind the fence on Thursday morning. 3 guys in neon vests hopped out, walked around for a few minutes, then started tearing the shed apart like they'd been hired to do it. Then I saw her. Zina Taylor, head of our HOA board, self-proclaimed neighborhood preservation advocate, and the nosiest neighbor in the state of Virginia. She stood there, arms crossed, barking orders like she was running a military operation. I even caught her on camera pointing at my vintage Harley and saying, "That eyesore better be gone too." I paused the video. My jaw clenched so hard I thought I'd crack a molar. I walked straight over to her house, which of course was only 3 houses down, knocked on her spotless white door. She opened it with that same smug look she wore at every HOA meeting. "Zina," I said, voice tight, "you want to explain why my shed is gone?" "Oh," she blinked, feigning confusion. "You mean that illegal structure cluttering up your backyard? It was non-compliant with HOA standards." "I had it removed for the good of the neighborhood." "You had it removed, without notice, without a hearing, without even contacting me." She folded her arms, her mouth twitching like she was trying not to grin. "Daryl, you've been warned about that shed before. It was never approved." Page 17 of the HOA guidelines, page 17 says structures must be approved by the board. I got approval in writing from the previous president 4 years ago. You've seen the emails. "That was before I was elected," she said, brushing a speck of imaginary dust off her sleeve. "Things are different now." My blood ran cold. She wasn't just arrogant, she was bold enough to think she could bulldoze people's property and hide behind a procedural excuse. "You owe me $30,000, I said flatly. She actually laughed. "I don't owe you anything." The HOA acted within its rights. I stepped back, took a deep breath, and just nodded. "All right," I said. "Let's see what a judge thinks." Then I turned and walked away while she stood there, frozen on her porch like a deer in headlights. The next morning, I drove straight to the county records office. I needed every shred of paper that had ever passed through HOA hands with my name on it. Took 2 hours and a very patient clerk, but I walked out with a folder an inch thick and a flash drive with digital backups. Then I made a stop at the office of a lawyer I'd met a few years back, Marcy Ellison. She used to be a prosecutor before switching to property law, and she didn't take kindly to people abusing authority. She was already flipping through the photos I'd printed from the security footage when I walked in. "Tell me you haven't touched anything out back," she said without looking up. "I haven't even raked the tire grooves." "Good, don't. I want it exactly how it was when you came home." "This is straight-up trespassing, destruction of private property, and potentially grand theft. You said that motorcycle was in there." "Yeah," I said, "and not just any bike, custom frame, limited run engine, worth about 16 grand. She leaned back, eyebrows raised. "Did they take it?" "No." "Looks like they moved it to the other side of the yard before hauling the shed off, but they laid it in the grass. No cover, got scratched up." She tapped her pen against her notepad. "We're not just looking at civil damages anymore, this is criminal mischief. Possibly felony level if the value of the destroyed property is high enough." I handed her the printout of the approval email from the former HOA president. She read it twice, then pulled out her phone and took a picture. "No judge in the state's going to side with them on this," she said. but I want to bury them in documentation. Go get a contractor to write up a rebuild estimate, and I want a mechanic to assess the damage to your bike. We're going to make their insurance company cry." That night, I set up a second set of trail cameras around the yard, one facing the rear fence, one angled toward the back alley. I wasn't about to let Zina or her lackeys stroll in again while I slept. I also called a friend from my Army days who now worked for the county sheriff's department, told him what happened. He didn't say much, but the next morning, there was a county cruiser parked across the street, engine idling, just as Zina stepped out to retrieve her mail. She saw me sitting on my porch with a mug of coffee and froze. Her hand hovered over the mailbox for a second before she turned and went back inside without a word. Later that afternoon, I got a call from the contractor. The rebuild estimate came out to $28,000 and change, not counting the labor to re-level the yard and remove the tire ruts. I emailed the document to Marcy, along with the video footage and the damage report from the mechanic. Less than an hour later, she sent off a demand letter to the HOA's official mailing address and CC'd their insurance provider. I didn't hear anything for 3 days. Then came the knock. I opened the door to find a guy in khakis and a sport coat. "Late 50s, wire rim glasses holding a leather folder, Mr. Lambert," he asked. "That's me." "I'm Richard Vaughn. I represent the Belmont Pines Homeowners Association. I'm here to discuss your recent complaints regarding the shed removal." "Complaints," I repeated. "You mean felony-level property destruction?" "Yeah, come on in." He hesitated for a second, clearly not used to being invited in so directly, then followed me to the kitchen. I laid out the photos, the printed emails, the rebuild estimate, and the damage report. He skimmed each one, nodding occasionally. "I understand you're upset." "Not upset," I cut in. "I'm pressing charges." He looked up sharply. "I've already filed a police report," I continued. "Sheriff's office is reviewing the footage. My attorney says we're well past civil court territory." "You want to settle this quietly? You'll pay for the rebuild, the repairs, and the lawyer fees, or we go public." He sat back in the chair, tapping his fingers against the folder. "I'll be honest," he said slowly. "I didn't know about any of this until yesterday." The board didn't vote on the demolition. There was no formal motion recorded. No minutes. Zina Taylor acted unilaterally. That stopped me cold. She didn't even inform the rest of the board. "Not according to the vice president," he said. "I spoke with her this morning. She thought the shed issue had been resolved years ago." I leaned against the counter trying to process that. Zina hadn't just overstepped, she'd gone rogue. "Then why are you here instead of her?" I asked. He gave a tired shrug. "Because the board's panicking. They're calling an emergency meeting tonight. Damage control." As he left, I watched him walk briskly to a silver Lexus parked at the curb, then disappear down the street. That night, I didn't go to the HOA meeting. I didn't need to. Instead, I set up my laptop on the porch and live-streamed the footage of the shed demolition on a local Facebook group called Belmont Pines Watchdog. The page had under 200 members when I clicked post. By morning, it had over 5,000 views and counting. Neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years started showing up at my door. Some brought coffee. Others brought their own horror stories, threatened fines for having the wrong shade of mulch, forced repainting of fences they just stained. Even rumors about Zina trying to change setback rules to force someone to remove a deck. One guy, Lloyd, showed me a letter from 2 months ago threatening legal action over a non-compliant bird feeder. It didn't take long before things reached a boil. The following weekend, a group of 15 homeowners walked into the monthly HOA meeting, each holding a signed petition. They demanded a vote of no confidence in the sitting president. Zina tried to adjourn the meeting on the spot, citing procedural irregularities, but the vice president stepped in and overruled her. Turned out she'd been quietly gathering complaints against Zina for months. She just didn't have enough backing to act. Now, with the shed video in circulation and a police investigation underway, the tide had shifted. I stood at the back of the room, arms crossed, as Zina's voice rose higher and higher, trying to justify her executive decision to protect property values. Every excuse landed like a wet sock. When she accused me of staging the footage, someone shouted from the crowd, "Then why did you run the crew?" I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The board voted. 5-1. Zina was removed as HOA president effective immediately. The lone vote in her favor was her own. As she stood to leave, someone recorded her walking out shoulders stiff, eyes forward, ignoring the murmurs of people she used to boss around like schoolchildren. The sheriff's department called me 2 days later. They'd completed their preliminary review. Charges were being forwarded to the county prosecutor. Unlawful property destruction, trespassing, unauthorized removal of private structures, and interference with personal property. The crew she hired. They'd been subcontracted under the table, no permits, no documentation, all of that fell on her. Her lawyer tried to settle before it went to court. Marcy declined. We wanted precedent. The judge didn't take long, ruled in our favor across the board. Zina was ordered to pay $34,000 for damages, legal fees, and restitution. She tried to appeal, denied. Funny thing is, the new HOA president Lloyd, the bird feeder guy, passed a motion to require board members to get written community approval before touching private property. They named it the Lambert Clause. I rebuilt the shed in the exact same spot, bigger this time, reinforced steel siding. Motion lights, tool racks, and a new Harley parked inside. This time I installed 4 cameras, just in case. 2 weeks after the court ruling, my mailbox started filling with letters. Not from the HOA, though that circus had gone quiet for the first time in years, but from residents. Handwritten notes, thank yous, and in one case, a drawing from a kid who lived 3 houses down. It showed me standing next to a rebuilt shed, cape fluttering, with the words "Shed Man" scrawled across the top in red crayon. That one stayed on my fridge. The funny thing was, I hadn't set out to be anyone's hero. I just wanted my stuff back and for people to stop pretending they could crawl over fences like they owned the place. But once you expose rot, people start looking for more of it, and they found plenty. Turns out Zina hadn't just overstepped with my shed. She'd been signing off on landscaping contracts without board review, funneling payments to a company run by her cousin. The lawn care bills were double what they should have been, and half the time, nobody even showed up to work. Residents had assumed the HOA was just inefficient. Nobody thought to question it until now. Lloyd brought it up during one of the newly opened public meetings. I sat near the back, arms folded, listening as he laid out the vendor invoices and bank transfers on a projector. The room went dead quiet when he pointed out that one of the checks had been deposited into an account under the name Zina Taylor Consulting. No one had ever heard of that business. Marcy contacted the county auditor the next morning. By that afternoon, the HOA's books were under review. A pair of forensic accountants were brought in, and things snowballed fast. I kept my head down through most of it. There was a certain satisfaction in watching it play out from a distance. But then something happened that pulled me right back in. It started with a soft knock around dinner time. I opened the door expecting another neighbor with a question about bylaws or a petition. Instead, there was a man in a navy blue jacket with a gold badge clipped to it. "Mr. Lambert," he said. "Detective Ronson, Financial Crimes Division." I stepped aside and let him in. He pulled out a folder and laid it on the kitchen table. Inside were printed screenshots, bank statements, a receipt from a storage unit, and one very familiar image, my Harley sitting in a metal garage, time-stamped 3 days before the demolition. "I thought you said your bike was left on the lawn," he said. "It was," I replied, "scratched up, but it was still on my property." He tapped the photo. "Not according to this. We found that unit while following up on the landscaping company. It's registered under Zina Taylor's cousin. Inside was your bike, cleaned and covered like it was being kept." My stomach dropped. "No," I said slowly. "She must have had the crew move it. I saw footage of them laying it down, but maybe that was staged." He nodded. We think the video was edited. They left just enough footage to make it look like the bike was still there, but the timestamps don't line up. We pulled the original camera logs. There's a 10-minute gap. I stared at the photo, the cover draped neatly over the seat, the tag with my name still zip-tied to the handlebars in my own handwriting. She tried to steal it, I said. She did steal it, he corrected. We're filing charges for grand theft auto, fraud, and tampering with evidence. And that's just the beginning. The next week was a blur. There were more arrests: Zina, her cousin, and one of the contractors she paid under the table. The detective called me back in to look at additional documents. Turns out she had created a dummy email account using the previous HOA president's name to fake the rescinding of my shed approval. The timestamp on that email, sent 2 days before the demolition, it was premeditated. I don't think this was just about a shed, Ronson said as he closed the file. She had a pattern. Anyone who pushed back got fined. Anyone who ignored her got targeted. You were just the first one who fought back hard enough to crack it open. Zina's arraignment was held on a rainy Tuesday morning. I showed up early, sat in the second row, and watched her walk in wearing a gray suit 2 sizes too big and a look that could curdle milk. She didn't glance at the courtroom gallery, didn't acknowledge anyone. The judge read off the charges: 6 felonies, including theft, fraud, and criminal conspiracy. Her lawyer tried to motion for leniency based on community service history. The judge didn't even blink. "Miss Taylor," he said, "you didn't serve this community, you exploited it." She was denied bail. After the hearing, I stepped outside and ran into Lloyd, who stood under a busted umbrella that didn't quite cover his shoulders. He looked tired but satisfied. "She's done," he said simply. "Maybe," I replied, "but we're not." He looked at me sideways. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we can't just fix the books and pretend that's the end of it. People trusted that system. We need to rebuild it from the ground up. New bylaws, oversight, transparency." He nodded slowly. "You thinking about running for the board?" I looked out over the courthouse parking lot, the rain turning oil stains into rainbow puddles. "Not unless I have to, but I'll help build it." Back in the neighborhood, things started shifting. The HOA meetings moved from the old office building to the community center. Open seating. Microphones for residents. Every expense above $500 had to be publicly approved with a written vote posted online. People started showing up. Not just the usual retirees or the ones who'd been fined in the past, but young families, folks who'd never once attended before. They brought folding chairs and coffee thermoses. They asked questions. They took notes. Someone suggested planting trees along the back alley where Zina used to sneak in contractors. The new board approved it unanimously. One afternoon, I was sanding a new workbench in the rebuilt shed when a teenager walked up the driveway. "Hey," he said, "you're Mr. Lambert, right?" "Yeah, my dad said you're the one who fixed the HOA," I chuckled. "I didn't fix it, I just kicked it hard enough for everyone else to notice it was broken." He nodded like that made perfect sense. Then he handed me a flyer. "We're organizing a volunteer day. Gonna repaint some fences, clean up the park. Thought maybe you'd want to join." I looked at the flyer, bright orange letters, a cartoon rake in the corner. "Count me in," I said. He smiled and jogged off. Later that week, I pulled the Harley out of the shed, the new paint gleaming in the sun. Took it for a ride through the neighborhood. Past homes with fresh coats of paint, kids playing in driveways, people waving from porches. No more signs about fines. No more anonymous complaint boxes, just a community finally acting like one, and behind it all, a steel-sided shed standing tall. Exactly where it belonged. The new board wasted no time cleaning house. Within days of Zina's arrest, they froze all discretionary spending and handed over the HOA's financial records to the county's Special Audit Task Force. I thought I'd seen the worst of it. I hadn't. 2 weeks into the audit, I got a call from Detective Ronson again, this time with a tone even more serious than before. "Mr. Lambert," he said, "you need to come down to the sheriff's office. We've uncovered something. I'd rather not say over the phone." I made it there in 20 minutes. Ronson met me in a small, windowless room with a stack of sealed evidence bags on the table. He didn't sit, just opened a folder and laid out a sheet of paper across from me. "You recognize this?" he asked. It was a permit application stamped, notarized, and signed by someone from the county zoning office. The problem was, it was dated 3 days before my shed was demolished, and it gave the HOA full authorization to remove unapproved auxiliary structures without needing the owner's input. "I never got this," I said. "You weren't supposed to," he replied. "It's a fake." He pulled out another document, the real permit application form. The formatting was different. The seal was missing. The signature belonged to a zoning clerk who'd retired 6 months prior. "She forged a permit," I said. "Not just one," Ronson said. "We found 5 others. 3 of them were used to threaten homeowners into tearing down fences and decks. One family sold their house after Zina claimed their back porch violated setback rules. She waved this same fake permit in their face. Did the board know?" He nodded once. 2 of them did. That's why we've expanded the investigation. We've confirmed conspiracy to commit fraud, falsifying public records, and coercion under color of authority. This goes beyond petty corruption. We're talking about organized criminal behavior under the guise of an HOA. I sat back in the chair, trying to wrap my head around the scope of it. Why would they go this far? For what control? Control. Power and kickbacks, Ronson said. She wasn't just collecting inflated landscaping fees. She was charging residents under the table to approve their additions. If someone refused to pay, suddenly they'd get hit with a fine or a demolition order. He handed me a list. Names I recognized, neighbors, friends. Every one of them had been targeted. "What happens now?" I asked. "We're building a case for racketeering," he said, "and we need witnesses." That evening, I sat in my shed, the sound of rain tapping the metal roof, and made a list of the people I knew had been hit hardest. Then I started knocking on doors. Some were hesitant, most were angry. But every single one of them agreed to speak to the detectives. Within a week, the case ballooned. Over 20 residents came forward with sworn statements. One man even handed over a recording Zina left on his voicemail, demanding a payment of $500 to avoid legal complications. The county prosecutor held a press conference the following Friday. The charges were read aloud on the steps of the courthouse. Racketeering, fraud, falsification of public records, conspiracy to extort, and multiple counts of criminal coercion. Zina and the 2 board members who colluded with her were indicted. Bail was denied. The community didn't celebrate with fireworks or banners. We were too tired for fanfare. But at the next HOA meeting held in the high school gym to accommodate the crowd, something happened that meant more than any legal win. Lloyd stood at the front and opened the floor. A woman named Teresa, who'd been fined for planting native flowers instead of approved ornamentals, stepped up and proposed a new clause banning the HOA from issuing fines without photographic evidence, and a 2/3 board vote. It passed unanimously. A retired Marine named Calvin, whose doghouse had been deemed unsightly, suggested a rule limiting the board's power to approve demolitions. That passed too. By the end of the night, over a dozen reforms were ratified, each one designed to prevent another Zina from ever rising to power again. I didn't speak until the very end. "I've got one more," I said, stepping to the front. "I want to propose we set aside funds each year for a homeowner's legal defense fund. If the board ever steps out of line again, residents shouldn't have to drain their savings to defend themselves. We back each other or we fall alone." That one passed by a show of hands, every hand in the room. A month later, Zina's trial began. I was called as a witness on the second day. The courtroom was packed with residents. When I took the stand, I didn't talk about the shed. I talked about the culture of fear she created, the way people stopped planting flowers, stopped building tree houses, stopped having backyard barbecues because someone might report them. "She didn't just demolish a shed," I said. "She demolished trust." The jury deliberated for 4 hours. "Guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to 8 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for at least 5. Her co-conspirators received 5 and 3 years, respectively. The HOA, under court supervision, restructured entirely. A rotating board system was implemented, with strict term limits and mandatory training in housing law and ethical governance. The county appointed an oversight liaison to attend every meeting for the next 2 years. As for me, I declined when they asked if I'd serve on the new board. I'd done my part. I was content to return to my tools, my projects, and my peace. One Saturday in early spring, I stood on my back porch, coffee in hand, watching the neighborhood kids build a lemonade stand at the edge of the sidewalk. No one stopped them. No one measured the distance to the curb. No one called it a temporary structure violation. That same afternoon, I got a knock on the door. It was Calvin and Teresa holding a wooden plaque. They handed it to me without a word. It read, in recognition of Daryl Lambert, for standing tall when others were forced to kneel. I hung it on the inside wall of the shed. Right above my father's old hammer, the shed stood taller than before, reinforced, repainted, and reimagined. But more than that, the neighborhood around it had changed. People planted what they wanted. Kids chalked up sidewalks without fear. Veterans held cookouts without asking permission. One man's shed had become a symbol. Not because it was built from wood and nails, but because it reminded everyone that no one, not even a paper tyrant with a title, gets to tear down what you've built without a fight. And now they all knew how to fight back.